Breaking tonight, we are seeing new reports that GOP frontrunner Donald Trump may be getting some help from one of his opponents. Some pundits are suggesting that Governor John Kasich is making moves that appear designed specifically to help Trump. Trace Gallagher, live in our West Coast newsroom. Trace?
Megyn, John Kasich believes both Donald Trump and Ted Cruz would get killed in the election by Hillary Clinton and says he is the only one who can beat her. Kasich also knows he stands zero chance of winning the nomination in the primaries, but is staying in the race because during a contested convention, he thinks delegates would see that he is the most electable. Here's Kasich.
So what we really need to do is get these people, these critics, to get behind me and get their people to drop out so we can actually beat Hillary Clinton.
Political analyst Seth Abramson writes in the Huffington Post that he thinks we'll end up with a Kasich-Marco Rubio ticket, primarily because they would appeal to mainstream Republicans, Tea Partiers, along with non-white voters and many young voters. Of course, there is the sticky issue of Marco Rubio, who dropped out a month ago, still having more delegates than John Kasich. And now many are wondering about the possibility of John Kasich being Donald Trump's running mate. Over the weekend, the Kasich campaign actually teamed up with the Trump campaign in Michigan to help Trump's delegates get committee positions at the GOP convention in July, positions that would otherwise have gone to Ted Cruz. Kasich's team says they helped out Trump because Ted Cruz is trying to scoop up too many delegates. Analysts say the favor to Trump may mean nothing, or it could mean, if given a choice, Kasich would take Trump over Cruz. Megyn.
Trace, thank you. Joining me now with more, Montel Williams, who's an activist, former TV host, former naval intelligence officer, and a supporter of presidential candidate Governor John Kasich. Great to see you, Montel. Thanks for being here.
Good to see you too, Megyn. Thanks for having me.
Do you think there's any chance that John Kasich is really actually in this to support Donald Trump?
I only laugh. Now, the question's a great question, but it's absurd. Absolutely absurd. I think John has been on record stating unequivocally that he wants a fair process. And I think if you take a look at the entire landscape, why would he not position himself this way? Because the more, in this particular situation, he can Trump Cruz, he can also Trump. No one is going to go to this convention with the magic number.
So he's being strategic. You can't read too much into the actions about supporting one guy or another. He's being strategic for himself. Absolutely.
And I think unequivocally people need to remember history in itself. Remember, you know, Lincoln wasn't picked until the third round. So truthfully, this can be, you were talking about it earlier, what happens to these delegates after their first vote? All bets are off.
Well, that's why there's this article in the Huffington Post on their 8 reasons why the GOP ticket will be Kasich-Rubio, they said.
I'm sitting there looking at it.
Trump's not going to get it on the first one.
Correct.
They said if you think the establishment's going to go for Ted Cruz, you're crazy.
Correct.
And they're going to look at one thing, which is who can beat Hillary, and they say that that's where John Kasich comes in.
And you look at the numbers are actually factual. You know, if it's Kasich against Hillary Clinton, he crushes her. If it's Kasich against Bernie, he or Bernie's got an opportunity there, but I think if we get into the general election and they're both running, I think Kasich will close that gap.
But 2 points on that. 2 points on that. Number one is people on the Trump team and on Cruz say Kasich hasn't gotten it that bad. He's never been the front runner, so they didn't have all the cannons aimed at him the way these other two. So his numbers would go down, and those matchups would not be as favorable to him. The other thing they say, as Ted Cruz said to me recently, the Republican nominee is not going to be a guy who lost 49 states.
Yeah, but you also take a look at the fact neither one of the Democratic candidates ever will bring up Kasich's name. And why? Because it's fear. They talk about the guy that they're really afraid of. They'll make everybody else understand his legitimacy behind the Kasich camp. They know that he's the guy that can beat them. So I really think this is all strategic, and it's strategic on the Democratic side also.
You know, the Republican Party has this problem. It's had this problem repeatedly, where there's a candidate who matches up well against the Democrat in the general election, but that candidate cannot get out of the Republican primary. And I don't know that they've figured out for themselves what the issue is. You know, for years people have been saying, we need to nominate a true conservative. And that's the person who, and Ted Cruz is still making that argument. But so many others in the party this year are saying, that's not, we don't care about conservatism. We want somebody to blow up the system.
They want a Reagan Republican. Well, listen to what a Reagan Republican is. He's a person that's inclusive. He's a person that listens. He's a person that works with both sides to see if they can come up with a solution. That was the Republican I was. I left the Republican Party after Ronald Reagan because the Republican Party left me. And now I'm an independent. But for the first time, I actually see a candidate that's looking at America the day after the election, not the day of.
30 seconds left.
Sure.
Why don't you like Cruz? Why don't you like Trump?
I will tell you that unequivocally from my perspective, and I would say most of the military people that I've spoken to, I cannot vote for Donald Trump. He's a person who literally obviated his responsibility and sought a deferment at a time when there were people in this country dying, and wrote about how lucky he was to get away with that, being able to chase women, and now he wants to be the commander-in-chief and send other people's children off to die. Not happening.
He said he had,
had
an injury.
Yeah, whatever. Yeah, okay, and that's what but he also wrote about the fact that he got away with that in his book. And I'm so sorry. I just do not believe that Mr. Cruz represents the mindset of anybody in America except his own.
Montel Williams, great to see you.
Good to see you.
Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.